Welcome back to Hardware Unboxed. I am with Tim, so that must mean Q&A time. Yep. Q&A part 1. As usual, we asked very recently you guys if you had any questions that you wanted us to answer on the community tab. So, I don't know, people are familiar with the community tab by now, aren't they? You go to the Hardware Unboxed sort of like homepage thing, hit community tab, and anyway, you can ask questions there. We put it up around this time each month, so you'd have to sort of keep on the lookout for that. I think you do get notified sometimes.
Sometimes it's in the subscription feed, which is good.
Yeah, just weird thing that sometimes pops up, and that's where you ask them. Unless you're a Patreon or Floatplane member, then you get your own set of individual questions that you can ask on our Discord chat. Anyway, probably enough waffle. We do have quite a few interesting questions to get into to kick off the first Q&A of 2021, so let's get into it.
IPS is renowned for producing some of the best colors available for gaming monitors, but it's always come at a trade-off. MSI has taken their engineering to a whole new level with the introduction of a revolutionary rapid IPS panel that's backed with quantum dot technology. For the first time ever, the new MSI Optics MAG274QRF-QD gives you game-changing speed with unprecedented color accuracy that outclasses the best of the best that we've tested here on the channel. Revel in rich, deep, incredible color and push your gaming to its limits with 1 millisecond grey-to-grey response times and ultra-fast 165Hz refresh rates. If a gaming monitor could be described as coming close to perfect, this would be it. So learn more about MSI's new Optics MAG274QRF-QD monitor via the links below.
All right, first one here. Is there any point in releasing mining GPUs? Wouldn't miners still want gaming GPUs as they could still sell it to gamers if cryptocurrency were to crash? So recovering a bit of the initial investment there, I suppose. Well, we don't know too much about mining because Tim and myself have never done any kind of mining. I imagine if you were just Joe Blow, some random guy that wants to do a mining rig in his garage, the incentive there to spend a bit more on gaming GPUs so that perhaps you could sell them if things went wrong. You've got a bit of an out there where you can recover funds when you want to upgrade later on. So I suppose that makes sense. As for what was the first part of the question? Is there any point in releasing mining GPUs? Well, again, not a miner, so I don't know. It's not a sort of great thing for us to answer because we don't specialize in mining. But I imagine by not including display outputs and things like that, you can shave a bit of the cost off the graphics card, so they will be a bit cheaper to produce. How much, I'm not sure. We have seen mining cards before, but I haven't really priced them against standard gaming cards. But I guess all the money you can save initially, it helps you recover that investment quicker, basically.
Yeah, I think it would depend as well the sort of setup that the card is in terms of cooling, for example. I'm sure that mining farms have slightly different cooling requirements to sort of your standard gaming rigs. So maybe your blower style cards would be more popular for mining rigs where they're all lined up on those boards. But I guess it really depends. Yeah, it's a kind of a toss up between what are the cost savings like in terms of removing the display ports and all that sort of thing, as opposed to is that worth it versus being able to sell the card to gamers later in the future. But we haven't seen too many mining specific GPUs made over the years. Most designs are still definitely gaming designs.
Yeah, at least at the markets that we sort of monitor, I suppose.
Yeah. I mean, there's been a few designs for sure, but the majority of the designs and cards sold still appear to be standard gaming cards.
Just easier to get your hands on.
Yeah, that's right. So,
theoretically.
I'm wondering if you guys have seen any drop in viewers and engagement in general due to the current pessimistic market situation, shortages, price gouging, etc. Personally, I am losing interest and considering to tune out from the PC ecosystem as a whole for like a year because I'm tired of hearing only bad news.
Understandable.
Yeah, I think that's a very understandable position to hold. In terms of sort of our view count and engagement right now, I'd say it's a little bit down. I mean, we've been producing less video or fewer videos as well, simply because it's a great time for us to take a break at this time of year. It's summer here in Australia. You know, advertising dollars aren't as plentiful at this time of year compared to the previous year, and also, you know, it's a little bit of the availability situation.
Yeah, it's mostly
so that's probably impacting it as well. But I think we've definitely felt the sentiment from people that, for example, your AIB card reviews in times when those GPUs are new and available, like 5700 series last year. Or was that the year before? Year before now, in 2019. Those videos could be very popular, but with the 30 series and the 6000 series, not as popular this time around because you can't buy them. So yeah, I guess from that sense there has been a bit of a drop, but I think the channel's doing pretty well overall.
I mean, we don't really care about the views too much, and
that's right.
as you noted earlier, the views for this month or this time last year are now higher.
Yeah,
so we're doing better in 2021 regardless of what's going on. So the views aren't so much of a concern for me. It's more just I've also lost interest massively. Like, I'm really struggling to make videos at the moment. Got a stack of various AMD and NVIDIA graphics cards that need to be reviewed. I will get to them. I'm trying to do like one a week at the moment, but it's kind of hard for me to make or get excited about making a video on these products when you guys can't buy them, and I don't know when you'll be able to buy them. Will it be in a couple of months, 6 months? Will it be this year? We don't know. So I'm similar attitude to a lot of you guys in the comments, not super excited to review these things. And it's sort of getting a little bit off topic when they talk about reviewers getting all the cards. It's like, I don't really get excited by that because I need, like you guys, I need one graphics card. So and sometimes we've only got them on loan, so we don't get everything for free as some people like to say. And for us, it's not about getting free hardware. It's about testing it out thoroughly to let you know whether it's a good purchase. And if that information at present isn't useful to you, then it takes a lot of the point out of doing it, a lot of the fun. I know it is, critical information for a lot of you who are holding out, trying to get one, but still, for most of you who've given up, we sort of feel that over here.
Yeah, it's definitely like the core of our content is making recommendations for people buying stuff. So,
definitely.
Head-to-head comparisons is a lot of our content.
Yeah.
And a lot of content that we make as well in the later parts of the year, like sort of your holiday season, can be game testing as well. Mm-hmm. And this is also not a period for that.
Yeah.
So it's not like we can go from producing a lot of comparisons that make sense, just producing game benchmarks, because neither of those things are really happening at the moment.
As you say, it goes beyond just AIB graphics cards. As I said, I've got quite a few of those that I would like to look at normally. I'd be all over it doing roundups, and as Tim mentioned, we did that with the 5700 series, the 5600 series, and I would have loved to have done a lot of like entry-level 3080s and 3070s, but you guys aren't really enjoying that content, or at least a lot of you. And it goes beyond just AIB graphics cards, because we do a lot of CPU versus CPU head-to-head type stuff, GPU versus GPU head-to-head stuff, and that's, again, all really buying advice. So if you can't buy it, there's really no need to give that advice. So, we're kind of just as bummed out as you guys are, and we're hoping things improve, but it looks like it's not going to happen anytime soon, unfortunately. So I'm not sure. I think I'll stick to getting through what I've got. I've already been rejecting a lot of AIB cards. There's a new, I probably shouldn't mention the name because I don't actually know if they've announced it yet, but there's a few new, very interesting looking graphics cards coming out. But of course, none of you are particularly interested because your chances of buying it are virtually nil. So normally I'd be all over that stuff, really excited to get it and test it out as quick as I can for you guys, but I've rejected tons of them and just said to the contacts at the companies, look, I'm sorry, we're not going to cover that. We've already got a lot that we don't necessarily want to cover because people aren't interested. So if availability improves, we'll look at that product in the future. Are there any interesting monitors coming up in the next months, especially ones with good value? Any good value monitors on the horizon?
Well, the good thing for the monitor market is that while availability is not great, and certainly there are lots of products out of stock, it's not as dire as the CPU and GPU market. So at times you can still buy products from different companies. So that's good. Mm-hmm. Interesting monitors. I think most of the stuff that's been announced that's coming sort of the first couple of quarters of this year are more your high-end stuff, because companies always want to get you around to buying high-end products. So we've seen your 1440p 240 hertz monitors, your 4K 144 hertz HDR new ultra wides. Those have made the bulk of the announcements so far. So I think you're really excited about the 32-inch 4K.
Interestingly, out of all the hardware that's coming out this year, the thing that I'm most excited about is a monitor. So I haven't done monitor shopping for quite some time, but I've been holding out for a 4K 144 hertz at 32 inches because that will allow me to game and work on the one PC rather than having a... So, it'll be very convenient, very nice. I'm looking forward to that.
So, I think those sort of things are sort of the stuff that I find interesting that's coming out, sort of the more high-end releases. Whereas the good value stuff, I know you've mentioned that in this comment, and that's a key thing for our channel as well. Those tend to just filter out through the year. They don't tend to make a lot of fanfare. Again, most brands want to focus on their high-end stuff and sort of let you get around to figuring out they have cheaper stuff. So yeah, I'd be expecting a lot of that stuff to filter in. I should be getting products like, for example, the Samsung Odyssey G5s. That's their 144 hertz new, sort of your mid-range entry-level product from them. Stuff like the ViewSonic VX2758. They've got a new version of that that I'm also have requested one of. So yeah, we'll be checking out good value products and high-end stuff throughout the years, but I don't think you'll hear too much about the value products as much as you will from the high-end stuff. That just tends to be how it works.
All right, next question here. Should we skip Rocket Lake? Isn't Elder Lake supposed to be better in every way? Yeah, possibly. These prediction type ones, we don't really know even really what we're getting with Rocket Lake apart from some leaked stuff and whatnot. Of course, now availability plays into these decisions massively, but it does seem like we will be getting the next generation of Intel and AMD CPUs potentially later in the year, I would have thought.
It's kind of a weird release cadence, isn't it?
It's
it sounds
very
like
strange.
Rocket Lake coming sort of maybe March timeframe at a guess. I know they've announced a certain timeframe. I think it's Q1.
Yeah, it's definitely March it's happening.
So March for that. And then Alder Lake, there's been rumors recently that even the desktop parts are coming in September. Now, how true that is, I don't know. That sounds to me more like a mobile sort of timeframe, and I would expect to see mobile Alder Lake parts first. This is how Intel's been announcing all their products for the last couple of years. But it still presents an interesting situation if they did launch in the next half of the year, because would people be interested in upgrading to a CPU that's being replaced in 6 months? Or is it going to be a different product
even if it's early
segment?
next year, really, because DDR5, new motherboards, memory, all that sort of stuff.
But there's still question marks over, is Rocket Lake going to be, say, the gaming CPU because of its high frequencies, its new IPC, that could potentially retake the gaming crown? Whereas on Alder Lake's side, it may be about a different type of processing. So maybe the first launch is more your productivity parts, considering there's been rumors of 16-core designs and maybe not being able to hit the frequencies that Rocket Lake can hit. So there's a lot of stuff to play out there that means that I don't think you can really just say Alder Lake is definitely going to be better and you should skip it, because we really don't know at this point.
We don't know. Yeah, we've got to see Rocket Lake, we've got to see prices, all that kind of stuff. And then ultimately only you can answer that anyway. You watch our day one review and then you make the decision whether you want Rocket Lake or Zen 3. Zen 3 is available. And do you need to upgrade right now, or can you hold out 6 to 12 months and see, then? Of course, you can always wait. But maybe you want to do it with a new GPU as well, and they may be still next to impossible to buy at that time. So a lot of things that need to be answered, but ultimately, really all we can do is provide you with a day one review as comprehensive as possible, and you go and make the decision from there.
Yeah, I think when it comes to sort of when we know future products on the horizon, when it gets to like a couple of months beforehand, we tend to say that is the point that you would hold off. But with like a 6-month release cadence,
we're talking 2 generations.
Yeah, it's kind of in that weird zone where like 6 months is a decent amount in the future that around the Rocket Lake launch, you should probably just be considering that. But then a couple of months later, it starts getting to that point where normally we would start recommending you hold out and sort of see what the next generation is going to be. So it's going to be a weird situation.
What are the situations though? Like, what is the person asking this question, what is your situation? Are you without a computer now, or is your computer really old and just struggling to get by and it's a bit of a hassle for you? Like, all those things factor into the decision. If your computer is either you don't have one at all, or the thing you've got is just virtually unusable at this point, then really you're probably going to want to upgrade to Rocket Lake or Zen 3, or look at something, secondhand that's cheaper. Or if your computer, it's like, it works well enough, I'm just, wanting to spoil myself a bit and upgrade a bit earlier, then in that situation, you're probably better off waiting, because you'd get it seems like you'll be getting a whole platform upgrade to something more substantial, but again, we're just guessing. So anyway, we'll move on. AMD was said to have secured additional manufacturing capacity at TSMC in the second half of 2020. Why are shortages of their products continuing? How long does it take to manufacture a CPU? Like, what's the lead time?
Yeah.
I'm not actually sure on that one. We know with Ampere that the silicon was manufactured. I think there was like 2 months lead time there from Samsung for the like very first sort of review samples. That's a bit more extreme though, because they had to not only produce the silicon but also design the product around it. But it seems like 2 months based on that.
I think a couple of months tends to be the manufacturing lead time. So yeah, when it comes to manufacturing a CPU, it's not just about getting the silicon out of the factory. So obviously we've heard about, you know, the TSMC supply constraints and all that sort of thing. It then has to go and be packaged together with the substrates and all that. And then after that's done, put into the box, shipped to the retailers, all that sort of thing. So I believe when it comes to manufacturing the actual silicon wafers, it's not too long, but then all the rest of that stuff takes a bit of time, especially because the area that they make the CPUs, like for example, they get the wafers out of the factory in Taiwan, for example, it could then be packaged in an entirely different country. So all that stuff takes time. And yeah, why are the shortages of their products continuing? I think we've talked about this a few times on the channel before. They're simply trying to make too many products on the one node. Maybe too many is not the right word, but the demand for all of the products across all their lines is very high.
Very popular products. Demand is extreme.
Yeah.
Obviously, Radeon GPUs are in extreme demand. There's virtually no supply of those.
Yep.
Zen 3 CPUs, extreme demand, which is why we're not seeing the non-X versions. They're not going to exist anytime soon. Then you've got the consoles. We've still got like Zen 2 parts. So
you got the server line, which is obviously a very high margin product. So there's a lot of incentive for AMD to sell like an Epic CPU instead of a 5600X, for example, because it just makes a lot more sense to get the volume and get the big margins on that. So yeah, it's been kind of a perfect storm for TSMC, being able to sell everything at maximum capacity, and kind of I guess AMD's just had record revenue, so can you really say it's like a nightmare for them? Because they're selling literally the most that they could possibly sell right now.
Yeah, it's a nightmare for their customers. It's a great situation for them to be in. I'm sure they're not minding too much at all. What a luxurious position to be in as someone who's selling something, to be able to sell it basically as you're making it. It's
just crazy.
Yeah, so... okay, so I guess this is not a bad question to follow on from, really, because we kind of answered it. When will budget GPUs arrive, and do you think they will be or go out of stock as fast as the higher end parts? Well, as we were just saying, AMD already have all these 7nm. They have a heap of products that are using the same node, so they have a manufacturing bottleneck. And yeah, they might be pumping them out in a reasonable volume, at least for some of those products, but again, the demand is so high that they're just selling everything they can make as they make it. So the incentive for them to go make more products isn't there. Also, they can't because they just don't have the capacity for more dies, because it requires more wafers for different dies to create smaller GPUs. So really, they're in a position now where it's not possible to physically make like a 6700 series GPU. So that's the situation there.
I think the only reason we would see a low-end GPU from an AMD perspective is if it's like a bin of a higher-end chip that they're already manufacturing. Yeah. So on the GPU side, with the 6800, we're probably unlikely to see that die binned into an even lower part.
Well, that's where they would have made those calculations, which is why the 6800 is where it is.
On Zen, I guess there's like an outside chance that you might see a 5600 if they can't bin as many 5600Xs. But I imagine by now on 7nm, they've got enough of a...
Yeah, the problem you run into there is it's very much like a Ryzen 3 3300X situation. So they'll be collecting an inventory of those dies that can't be used as 5600Xs. They'll become perhaps 5600s or something lower. And that's all good and well, but they'll only get so many of those dies. They put them on sale, they will sell out very quickly, and then they're faced with a situation where they take silicon that could be sold at a higher margin to then fulfill the orders for those lower end parts. And obviously they didn't do that. Well, they have done it in the past when they've been a bit more desperate for sales.
But well, that's usually a situation where CPUs are already, there's a supply, there's an oversupply of CPUs. So you would make lower end parts in that situation because you still want to get sales in across all the segments. Whereas if you're supply constrained like we are right now, there's no incentive to sell a part as a let's say a Ryzen 5 quad core, for example, a Ryzen 3 quad core, over like a 5950X, because all of them are just going to get sold out straight
Which
away.
is exactly what happened with Zen 2. So,
Yes.
So, anyway, to answer the question, look, they could announce them shortly, but I don't think so. Given everything we know and the supply issues they currently face, as far as I'm concerned, it doesn't make sense for them to do it. So, kind of a rough position to be in.
Nvidia is potentially a different situation
Nvidia
because
could, yes.
they use Samsung's 8nm manufacturing instead of TSMC, so they potentially don't have as much of a supply constraint. Obviously, right now, they can't get enough 3080s, 3090s, all those products out, but there's still a potential that, for example, the defect rate of that silicon is enough that making a 3080 is potentially a bit dicey right now, whereas making a smaller die for, say, a 3050 type product makes more sense for them. There's all sorts of dynamics going on there that would depend on like the defect rate, the costs of the silicon, how future defects are projecting, all that sort of thing.
We have no idea about yields. We don't exactly know where all the GPUs are going, so it's just all speculation.
So I think Nvidia is probably the only shot that we have right now of a budget GPU, and even then, who knows what's happening there, whereas AMD is definitely out for the time being. And I think they've even said in their latest earnings call that lower end products are not on the radar for them anytime soon. So,
which makes sense based on everything we just said. Next question here. When can we expect DDR5 to arrive? I remember we answered this question like a year and a half ago in a Q&A, and we said 2021. Which is technically correct because DDR5 does now exist.
Yes.
But when will we see it on a mainstream desktop platform, I think is probably the question here. And I'm expecting that to be like an AMD Zen 4 thing, as we spoke of earlier. We think that's coming towards the end of the year, but...
Yeah, it's still a bit unclear whether AMD is going to have like a stopgap release, like a Zen 3 Plus before they get into Zen 4, or whether they'll just go straight to Zen 4. And then obviously DDR5 is allegedly coming to Intel's Alder Lake platform as well. So that they've said that's coming basically late 2021. So
as a
around that time.
As a really rough guesstimate, and it really is a guesstimate, late this year at the absolute earliest. But certainly sometime next year, you would think.
Yes, I would say much more widespread adoption coming in sort of the 2022 timeframe. Whereas, for now, still got a bit of a wait on it.
Yep. We know you guys like to make YouTube videos, but do you like to watch them too? If so, what YouTube channels do you enjoy, tech or non-tech, when time permits? If not, what movies or TV shows are you into? So I don't watch too much tech-related content unless I'm doing like research or whatever. I try to watch a couple of the guys that we talk to and that, but obviously they're releasing videos as rapidly as we are, and it's hard enough watching our own content to proof it and stuff like that without going and watching everyone else's. So generally when I'm benchmarking, I like to have something going, and I usually watch YouTube, I'd say mostly. As many of you guys know, I love fishing and that and sort of outdoors stuff because I don't get to do a whole lot of it because I'm usually indoors benchmarking. One of my favorite channels at the moment is YBS Youngbloods. So it's a guy that's in Australia, Brody, and he does a lot of fishing, spear fishing, all that kind of stuff. Really cool channel. So if you're into that sort of stuff, definitely check him out. But his channel's huge. It's blown up massively. So any of you guys that are probably into that are probably aware of him. But yeah, he's always a lot of fun to watch. But as for the rest, there is a long list of fishing shows and outdoor shows that I watch. And then kind of like do-it-yourself handyman type stuff. I enjoy that as well.
Yeah, I'm pretty similar, to be honest, with especially with the tech stuff. I think both of us sort of, when you're making a lot of tech content and you want to just sit down and relax or watch something else, tech videos tend not to be like the top of the priority list. So yeah, I might watch like a couple of Gamers Nexus or Linus Tech Tips videos from time to time, but it's not sort of my go-to. I tend to watch more maybe like I go through, I guess, phases of watching stuff. Like sometimes I get really into people's like science channels where they explain stuff and go through that. And then at other times I watch like the DIY maker videos where people like engineer like cool robots and stuff.
They're always good.
I like watching those. Or it could be like a comedy channel that I'll just run through all their backlog of videos, watching sketches or whatever. So yeah, that tends to be my go-to stuff. Mighty
Very
Car
similar
Mods
then.
or
Yep.
channels like that. Just all sorts of things from all sorts of creators. Love watching lots of stuff. But I think, yeah, YouTube is such a big deal these days. You can find so much great content to watch on there. I do watch movies and TV shows as well, but sort of if I'm benchmarking or something, then YouTube's my go-to.
Yeah, movies have been pretty tough the last few years, I reckon. There's not so many good movies. There are a lot of good quality TV shows, though.
Yeah, that's right. I do have quite a backlog of, when people say like, oh, you should watch this, and I just added like this enormous list because like when working on this YouTube channel, I don't have, the hundreds of hours a week I would need to focus on watching all these TV shows.
Mine's
people
just
say
like
good.
say when I'm benchmarking, I'm half listening to the show. But anyway, all right, next question here. When should someone consider going from a top-end Ryzen to a Threadripper system? So this is kind of an interesting one because you have gone from Threadripper to top-end Ryzen and sort of considering going back to Threadripper. But basically, obviously, it's someone who is doing productivity-type workloads who needs a lot of cores. When should you consider? It's really, well, I suppose you would have to have a workload that uses a lot of cores and you're wanting to speed up that workload because time's money. That would essentially be it, really. So you would go from something like a 3950X or 5950X to one of the third gen Threadripper parts or the upcoming fourth gen 5000 series Threadripper parts.
Yeah, and generally when making that switch, you're going to be losing a little bit from your top end frequency in terms of single thread performance. Not always the case, but that can be a consideration. So it's not going to be a gaming situation where you're going to be, for example, like a gaming plus content creation system. You're probably more going to stick to your top end Ryzen, but for pure content creation, then that is when you switch over. Maybe memory bandwidth might be a consideration for you as well if you've got a very memory sensitive workload.
Depends what you're prioritizing, really.
Yeah, you might need workstation features like better PCI compatibility, better more slots on your board, more SATA ports, more USB, which you tend to get those features with higher end.
I guess it's one of
Threadripper
those questions where the answer is if you have to ask, you're not ready to make the jump.
Yeah, because if you're still in the prosumer line where you sort of, am I getting 3950X, am I getting Threadripper, then probably should more tend towards Ryzen.
Yep.
I think Threadripper really is for if you have a known specific workload that benefits from Threadripper, then that's when you should consider it. But if you don't really know,
and time's money, because it is a big financial investment.
That's right.
Especially for third gen Threadripper, it's very expensive. So basically, you have to be making money from what you're doing for the investment to be worth it.
Yeah, that's right.
Again, it's something for you guys to decide. But yeah, it's basically more cores. How many generations of GPUs before AAA titles can be natively rendered at 1440p or 4K without needing DLSS with RTX on? So without ray tracing enabled, basically. I would say quite a few generations, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
Quite a few at the very least. And it may be a thing where they just pursue DLSS for ray tracing on to mitigate that performance hit, because there's always going to be quite a big performance hit. We've talked about this before, like with anti-aliasing, I think was the example you gave, and it took quite a few generations before you just turned that on by default because GPUs were so powerful and different methods came in that made it much more efficient and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I think there's a lot playing out here. I mean, if we saw from, say, like Cyberpunk 2077, if you try and play that, even on an RTX 3090 at like 1440p with all the ray tracing features on, you're at like 10 FPS. Or at least like well below 30 FPS for the most part. So if you're taking that specific example and saying how long until that's playable, like you say, it's generations, isn't it? But I think the question as well is native rendering going to be a thing in the future? Because when you think about it, like we've already got DLSS now, which again, some people don't like it. I'm of the opinion it's still worth turning on in most instances.
I think especially at 4K, it's very good at 4K.
It's very good at 4K. Obviously, some people are more sensitive and notice the slight softness that you get from not rendering natively, and they prefer native rendering. But there's nothing to say that DLSS can't improve over time. We might get new techniques. And I think these days with consoles have been doing it for a while now, it's now coming to PC, that sub-native rendering and reconstruction is the way of the future. And something like DLSS, it gives you a slight reduction in quality, but the extra performance can be put towards so many different things. That could be more visual effects like ray tracing, it could be more standard effects, or it could be a higher frame rate. So I think a lot of developers are sort of realizing that one of the easiest compromises that can be made is doing something like DLSS and reconstructing the image. So I think it's not going to be a thing. I think people wanting native rendering in the future are just, it's not going to be a realistic target for modern games because everyone's going to be assuming you're running it with some reconstruction. So then the performance without it will be terrible. And that's just what we're going to face. But I can imagine it getting much better over time as well as AI gets better. You know, you start seeing very impressive deepfakes, for example, more recently. And that's only going to help. That sort of technology is only going to help with this.
Yeah, well, in a relatively short time, it's already improved significantly since we first saw it in Battlefield 5.
Yeah,
so.
Like Battlefield 5, right, when that came out, like late 2017, 2018?
Was Metro Exodus the next one?
Yeah, sometime around then. And now it's quite usable. So I think that's the future that we're facing. And to be honest, it makes sense. It makes sense it's like an easy performance sort of thing that we can get. Instead of having to turn off ray tracing, we can sort of go down that path, which, makes sense to me.
Okay, at what point, subscriber count, did you guys start seeing a real job income? Don't know. It's not really based on subscriber count. I guess we could work out where the view count correlates with the subscriber count. But I think for us, it was around getting about a consistent 2 million views per month, where it got to the point where, you know, I could bring Tim on board and pay him, get a cut that is worth a full-time wage, I suppose.
Yeah. And this is going to vary from channel to channel. So, for example, our channel has quite diverse income streams. We have, you know, the YouTube ads that you've seen. We have Amazon affiliate links. We have our Patreon accounts. We run ads. So for us, like 2 million views may be more equivalent to, say, 6 or 8 million views on a channel that doesn't have as many of those things. So yeah, it really does depend. I guess for us, 2 million was the sort of mark, but yeah, it's going to depend. I mean, I've heard from financial channels, like ones that cover the stock market, that they get like 20 times the amount from YouTube AdSense per view than we do. So obviously for them, it's going to be a lower figure that's going to be sustainable. But
and we're in the fortunate position now where money is no longer something we worry about or think about when we do the content. Now we just go about doing our job. We make the content and the rest takes care of itself. So it's not something Tim and I like to talk about or worry about. We just get to do what we like doing. And
it's great because it allows us to reject ad deals, quite a lot of ad deals, stuff that we really don't want to run on the channel that's either dodgy products or would create conflicts of interest with the content, for example. Yeah, which is why you guys don't I would still say the vast majority of our content doesn't have an ad from us baked into it. That's right. That's fairly rare, really. All right, we'll hit pause there. Part 1 done. Hopefully we did a good job there. We'll find out shortly when we start reading the comments below of what things we got wrong or right or what people disagree with. So it's always good to read your feedback there. So feel free to drop a comment if you feel that that is necessary. And it probably helps with the algorithm or whatever. Oh, probably these days. Give it a like, you know. We'll do all that YouTube stuff. I think it helps. Who knows? No one really knows. But yeah, not too much more to say on that one. So I think we'll wrap it up there. And part 2 will be on the channel tomorrow if Tim gets editing and gets this one done in time. So it's all on Tim. Yep. Hopefully I get my act together on it. Future Tim. Never know. Good job. Never know with future Tim. He's sketchy as. All right. Well, thank you very much for watching. Again, if you'd like to join the Harbour Unboxed community, you can do so over on Floatplane or Patreon. So the links for those things are in the video description. Check those out if you're interested. As I said, we do a part 3 Q&A. So that's the Patreon Floatplane people. What else do? We do a live stream, which we just did. So we do that at least once a month. Behind the scenes videos, a lot of cool stuff. Anyway, check it out if you're interested. That's going to do it. I'm your host, Steve. I'm your host, Tim. See you next time.